I am thrilled to welcome a really, really special South African French journalist, specifically because she is an investigative journalist who has spent a lot of her career so far going around the world into places where bad things are happening, where big business and large governments are trying to make sure that nobody outside of that area finds out about the bad things that are happening in that area. And when journalists are doing the kinds of work that upsets powerful people on behalf of people who are being exploited and are having their lives harmed, I want to talk about it. And one of those people is here tonight. Please welcome the wonderful Julie Bourdin is here. Thank you so much for joining us. So just so people who aren't familiar with your work, which I think is fabulous, have some sense, the last thing you did was go to a city was it the north of Zambia, and report on how some mines there have caused massive lead poisoning that is sickening basically an entire city. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's one of the most recent articles I've had published. I went a couple months ago already.
Crazy. And it was published in a very big American publication, which is cool. But what other work have you done? You were in Madagascar recently also?
Yeah, I was in Madagascar for an article on climate change, how it's affecting some islands there. I was in Lesotho last year. I was recently in Mayotte, which is a French island that was in the Indian Ocean, hit by a cyclone in December. How
did you end up in investigative journalism? What was the bug that bit you to go, not am I just going to sit and be a journalist in one city or one country, but I'm going to try and find ways for people to fund me to go to other countries around the world and write about really impactful, important crisis stories often that need to be talked about?
I think it all starts with curiosity, just being interested in seeing what's happening and not just reading about it, but actually going in the field and talking to people who are affected. And one of the main reasons I do journalism is to try to make a small difference in the tiniest way possible by just like helping people, I guess, be heard on a global platform.
And do you also have no fear?
I do, but often I'm much less at risk than the people I'm talking to.
For sure. So, I mean, it is well known and does not need to be examined at any further length how journalism around the world is suffering in the face of radical budget cuts, dropout of advertising, more and more journalism jobs are disappearing, more and more journalists have to do way more work, writing way more articles to get way more clicks than actually going to investigative journalism. And there's a wave of AI and fake news and all the rest, and propaganda from governments around the world. In that context, can you tell me how investigative journalism as a business works? Like, if anybody is watching right now, how do you get funding from someone to say, go and do this, and in 6 months' time we'll write this story and fly you to northern Zambia, or fly you to Lesotho, or fly you to Madagascar, or whatever? How do you then turn around a story that will work for them? What's the process?
Like you're right. It's not easy. There's a lot of people who want to do it and don't get these opportunities, and a lot of stories that don't get covered because of it. There's luckily still a few media that do have budget for flying journalists out for reporting, or at least for paying like local reporters who do incredible jobs to cover stories that matter. In my case, in a lot of stories, I've had money from funds, like funds, and especially like, for example, the European Journalism Fund. There's grants, so you put in an application with the story you want to investigate, and then they will fund some of your reporting.
So you got to apply it a bunch. And
you got to apply a bunch. It takes a while.
That's
you do it
crazy.
months before. You need to plan everything, budget everything, and then if you're lucky, because only a few people can get chosen, they do fund part of it.
And what's the experience of going to a country you've never been to before like, and having to walk into a community of people and say, you don't know me, I don't know you, but I think there's something happening here that I want to write about, building trust, and then finding like the really good stories in those communities. I'm sure it's like a real skill that not everybody has.
It really depends on the place. I think there's some countries that are much more open than others, and people that are much more open to speaking, and also it depends on the story. If it's a very sensitive story, often you prepare a lot in advance. You speak to local journalists on the ground that often you end up collaborating with a lot. You speak to, people who are community leaders or NGOs or just like people who are affected themselves, and they often are the person who introduces you to the people you want to speak to. And yeah, then you fly in. Ideally, we would want to spend as much time as possible. I would love to spend like a month on every story that I do, but unfortunately, there's not much funding anymore for this kind of reporting.
So I think a lot of us saw that movie, I think it was called Civil War, which was imagining the end of America as some kind of terrible apocalypse battle between different American militias. And that was told around the story of photographers and journalists going to find the story. Do you often go in a team of people like that, where you've got a photographer with you or a photojournalist and the rest?
Yeah, I really try to collaborate, simply also because I don't really like going on my own.
Yeah, of course.
It's a little bit just less interesting, and it's nice to have someone to like bounce ideas with, and it's also nice to be able to support each other in getting work, because we're all struggling in this business. So yeah, I've collaborated with quite a few photojournalists especially.
Okay. And tell me about the emotional, it must be hard, like the emotional toll of going into places where really, really difficult, often tragic, often painful and life-ending things have happened to many people. And of course, I'm not saying that it's harder for you than it is for them, of course not, but like to have the job of trying to get their stories out as best as possible while encountering the pain and the trauma and the devastation of things that happen to people, it must be like really harrowing sometimes.
I don't think it's for everyone. I think some people take it much harder than others.
Are you in therapy?
No. Probably
should you be in therapy?
But not for this, maybe. I think it's. I mean, like you said, we're lucky that I'm able to leave these situations. You know, I'm able to talk to people, and you almost have to still yourself also, because you have to do your job and you have to report on it like fairly and accurately, and then you're able to just leave. And sure, sometimes you need to talk to friends or people or therapists in some cases, but it's mainly the people who you talk to who are struggling. Mm. And I must say, like, some of the stories that have impacted me the most have been in South Africa. I've done some stories on mining, the impact of abandoned mines and corruption in the mining sector in Mpumalanga, for example, that really kind of stayed with me in terms of the consequences on the people and the communities there.
It's interesting because when I put out a show, if no one watches it, I feel sad. and if you put out a piece and no one reads it, you probably feel sad personally, but you probably also feel like screaming at the moon, because it means that the world isn't caring about the story, about the bad things or the difficult things that you reported on. You must be like, why doesn't the world care about this thing that I've reported on? Do you sometimes just find yourself screaming in the car, like, how is this not being taken seriously by mainstream media or South African life or readers?
I think there's a lot to care about in the world. There's just so much competing for our attention. And mainstream media, I think, gets a bad rep, and fairly in some cases, but I think mainstream media has a lot of people in it who try to make it work. And the media I work for is mainstream media. If you look at National Public Radio in the US, it is mainstream media. So I think, yeah, everyone's battling, we're all battling to get our stories heard. But there's just so much happening in the world. There's so many wars currently happening at the same time. That I understand that people don't have the emotional capacity to care about one story. But then when one story is really heard and resonates with people, as the Zambian one has done, the Kabwe story, it feels really good to be able to also tell the people that you spoke to that they're actually being heard, like, all the way across the world.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. Okay, so a lot of people who have an interest in journalism, a lot of people who work in media watch this show. And a lot of people have probably just listened to that and gone, I would love to do that, but I don't even know how to start or where to start. Is it as simple as going outside with a camera or learning how to write? Or is it like maybe go to school? Is it like go and do an internship in a big media company? Is it all of the above?
So I studied journalism at university, and I think that is, in most cases, kind of the easiest way to get into it if you're able to go to university. Luckily, it's a job that you can also enter through many different ways. I would say you're doing journalism, and you probably didn't
Thank you.
study
Nobody
it.
else thinks that.
And I think, yeah, I would never discourage someone from doing journalism, but I would say you should really think about it, because it is a difficult job. It carries a lot of responsibility. It's not appreciated very often, also by normal people. There's a lot of, criticism of journalism, sometimes fair and sometimes very unfairly. And it doesn't make a lot of money.
Any money.
And it's really a struggle, especially in South Africa, where unfortunately we really don't have much money in the press.
Yeah.
So I tell people to, think about it, and if they, after really think about it deeply, really want to do it, then either try to study it, try to get an in, and in many cases, people also, start their own radio show or TikTok or and then can get into it somehow through that, I
Yeah,
think.
that makes perfect sense. Well, thank you for the work you do.
Thanks
Thank you so much for your time and answering those questions. That's the wonderful Julie Bourdin, everybody. Thank you so much. And yes, clap for her. She's amazing. Yeah, exactly.